What is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. As free agency, for the most part, has officially concluded for the New York Giants. Now, there may be a couple of small signings along the way, as maybe the New York Giants could sign some value players to fill out the rest of this roster. But for the most part, don't expect any more big flashes. So now, Joe Judge, the New York Giants, and myself are going to start to turn our attention to the NFL draft. Of course, today reports came out, and we're going to talk more about it as the video progresses, that Micah Parsons had a killer pro day. We're going to jump into the numbers, and Joe Judge was in attendance. I think from what I read, there were 31 teams in attendance, but only 2 coaches, Mike Tomlin and Joe Judge. I could be mistaken on that, but I think that is what I read. And Micah Parsons is a beautiful fit for the New York Giants defense. The one thing that, you hear about that people are concerned with are the character concerns. Of course, Yetur Gross-Matos had those same character concerns last year. Didn't seem to affect his draft stock too much. And we'll have to wait and see if it does, in fact, affect Micah Parsons' draft stock. Now, Parsons went on to talk about that today or yesterday. I'm going to pull up the quotes. But before we get started on that, I kind of just wanted to recap free agency. And based off some of the things that the New York Giants did, what I feel are the biggest needs for the New York Giants entering the 2021 draft. And I'm going to go down a laundry list of signings, and the New York Giants made a ton of them. They brought in their backup running back, Devontae Booker. So right off the bat, to me, running back is not that big of a need for the Giants. You bring in an experienced backup. You're already paying Saquon Barkley a boatload of money. Could the Giants draft a running back? Sure. If they do, I think it'll be much later in the draft. I'm talking with one of those 2 6th-round picks that we possess. Leonard Williams, of course, was brought back to kind of solidify that defensive line, at least for this year, on the end. Do I think they'll draft a defensive lineman like Kwity Paye? Personally, no. That does not, however, take away the possibility of drafting an outside linebacker or a versatile linebacker like a guy like Micah Parsons. Do I think they'll draft a DN, though, in a 3-4 scheme? No, I do not. I think him and Dexter Lawrence are going to be really good. You could play Lawrence up the middle, or they could go with value with Austin Johnson and or B.J. Hill. But I do think interior defensive line is one of the needs for the New York Giants, being that both of those players will be free agents at the end of the year, and I just don't see it in the budget to bring those guys back if they perform at a higher rate. Not that I would take an interior defensive lineman in the first, but I think it's something you want to look out for in the first 3 rounds. John Ross is a burner. We don't know how much of an impact he'll have. He hasn't had a huge impact in the NFL, but it was a low-risk, high-reward signing. Definitely a guy that could contribute in special teams and maybe build more of a role with the New York Giants. Logan Ryan, of course, we all know is back for his veteran leadership, and he's very versatile, played very well for the New York Giants last year, and safety should be the last thing that the Giants are looking at right now. Kenny Golladay fulfills that number 1 exterior presence, but some people may argue that the Giants need a separation creator at the wide receiver position, an elite route runner. Galladay's more of a 50-50 ball guy, and I understand that concern. Adoree Jackson, the New York Giants brought in. I do not think we'll be drafting a cornerback early in this year's draft, maybe in the 3rd round. But in terms of the first 2 rounds, I do not think so. Reggie Ragland, a nice depth signing that could potentially start in certain packages against certain teams in the middle. Former 2nd-round pick. Glennon addresses the backup quarterback, so don't expect to be drafting a quarterback in this year's draft. Rudolph, I think, solidifies unless we trade Evan Ingram. We will not be taking a tight end early in this draft. We could trade Ingram, though, so it's possible. Afadi, the defensive end from the Minnesota Vikings, I view as a situational pass rusher. And then we brought back Austin Johnson, Casey Kreider, the long snapper, C.J. Board for special teams purposes. Jonathan Harrison is a depth offensive lineman. We also signed another depth offensive lineman today. And Ryan Anderson, an outside linebacker who I think will be a pass rush specialist. Now, does that mean that the New York Giants will not address the outside linebacker in this year's draft? Possibly not. They went with a lot of situational pass rushers between Afadi, Ryan Anderson. But in my opinion, as of now, the biggest needs for the New York Giants entering the draft, and this isn't necessarily where I am saying they need to select these players per round, but yes, I do believe right now the interior offensive line is the New York Giants' biggest need. You have to be able to protect your quarterback. Now, I'm open to waiting to the 2nd round if the right prospect is there in the 1st, but I do think it is our biggest need at this point in time, especially being that I think Will Hernandez more than likely will not be back after this year. You have Shane Lemieux, who had a lot of holes last year in terms of pass protection, and Nick Gates, who is versatile, but if you move him to guard, you would need a center. So I do think that is a big need for a team that brought in a lot of weapons. You want to make sure that you're able to block. In addition to that, I would say the edge, and there's a couple of spots that are close to the edge, but I would say right now a great edge is probably the one thing missing from this defense right now. We got really good safeties. We've got really good corners now. We've got a really good defensive line. We lack that prominent edge. And if there's an edge in this draft class, and Parsons could be that guy. Several people have said that Parsons is actually the best edge rusher prospect in this class, in their opinion. Yes, the Giants could look to fulfill that in the first or the second round. In addition to that, a close third, easily could be second to me, is interior defensive line for the reasons that I stated. I think we could use a true nose tackle, and I don't think Johnson and B.J. Hill will be here long term. I wouldn't look to address that in the first round, though. The Giants historically, and just in general historically, that is a value position. You could usually get good production in the third round, maybe, in that area. But I could see the Giants attacking that position within the first 3 rounds. And then finally, the wide receiver. Yes, we addressed it a lot. We brought in Kenny Golladay. We added John Ross. We added Kyle Rudolph. But would I be shocked if the New York Giants, if there's a really good wide receiver there at number 11, for example, Devontae Smith or Jalen Waddle, could the New York Giants entertain it? Sure. And then look to fill in the bigger needs down the line in the second and third round. I still think that's open as a possibility, but in terms of immediate needs, I'd probably rank it around 4th. Of course, Shepard may not be on this team next year either, as I demonstrated in my last video, and the Giants could look as Devontae Smith as a guy that could replace Sterling Shepard in the future lineup, and Darius Slayton more than likely would go to the 4th wide receiver on the bench, and you would have a ridiculous wide receiving core in terms of depth if that was to be the case. But I do think right now our biggest need is the interior offensive line, probably followed by the edge rusher and or interior defensive line. Now, as far as Micah Parsons goes, who, yes, is a linebacker, but he's a very versatile linebacker, a guy that really would fit this scheme for the New York Giants, that you could play on the inside and the out, and a guy that could really be the driving force of this defense for years to come if he's as good as he looks on tape. Today he had his pro day, and, I mean, the numbers speak for themselves. First, we're going to pull up a quote from Zach Rosenblatt. He said, Joe Judge is at Penn State's pro day, getting a good look at Micah Parsons. A legitimate possibility for the Giants at number 11. Of course, what a lot of people have, like I said, are the character concerns. But in terms of a prospect, the guy is elite. This is what he put up. And I heard some people say maybe he ran more than once. Some people were saying 4.36. It is at a pro day. Take it for what you will. But when you watch this guy on tape, when you watch this guy's highlights, this guy is an incredible athlete. You're talking about Saquon Barkley-like times, but the guy weighs, I think, right there, he weighs 246 pounds. He's 6'3". He's as fast as elite running backs, which is something that you want. Now, one thing that he struggled with in the past that some people talk about, his coverage skills. Now, this New York Giants team, as constructed, I ain't too worried about his coverage skills. I think we have a lot of good guys in coverage. We have the 3 safeties. We've got Darnay Holmes. We got Julian Love. We got 2 good cornerbacks. But I do think with his athletic ability, he could become a pretty good coverage linebacker in the NFL. The guy's a freak athlete. From what I've heard and what I've read at Penn State, he was not asked too much to drop back in coverage, so he's not very familiar with it. I think he only had about 75 or 80 reps in coverage last year at Penn State. It might have even been less than that, but he was not asked to do too much. He also had a 39.5 vertical jump and a 134 on the broad jump. To me, in my opinion, he may very well be the best defensive player in this year's draft class. And if he is there at 11, and if the character concerns check out, I think he's someone the Giants should consider. Now, a lot of people would say, well, the Giants wouldn't do that. Anybody with any kind of character concern, they're not gonna draft. Laramie Tunsil, of course, with the weed. There's been several other instances, and DeAndre Baker, bit them in the ass, for lack of a better word, when they drafted him and traded back into the first round. So maybe some people are concerned with that. This is a new regime. This is Joe Judge. And if Joe Judge thinks he checks out, I think Joe Judge would look to bring him in as a possibility if he were there at 11. Of course, he also played for Coach Sean Spencer well at Penn State. So you have the ties there as well. And I'm sure the New York Giants are doing their background. And I think it means something that Joe Judge was there today. Micah Parsons, of course, the headliner. There was a couple of other really good prospects out of Penn State. Some people say Pat Freiermuth. I don't think we're drafting a tight end, being that we signed Kyle Rudolph. But we'll see. This is what Parsons had to say regarding his character concerns. At the end of the day, I believe that I was a kid. Parsons said, I was 17, 18. We all make mistakes when we were 17, 18. I'm not going to let it control or dictate the person I am now. I'm not going to let something that was 3 or 4 years ago dictate who I've become and the father I want to be. Now, I'm not going to get into the allegations, but it was pretty graphic in terms of hazing other teammates. But like I said, Yetur Gross-Matos was involved in that as well. Didn't seem to hurt his draft stock too much. Then he goes on to say, everyone is going to learn and grow, Parsons said, and if someone is going to judge me over that, then I'd rather not be in their program. I know the type of person I'm becoming. I know the type of father I'm becoming, and that's all that matters to me. Anybody who's willing to accept my wrongs when I was wrong and accept my rights when I'm right, I'm ready to go ahead and give them my all. But if it's going to come down to something that I did in high school or something I wish I could change, I could only control what I could control and what I do moving forward. And then finally, this is what I think it was Jim Moore had to say. I know there's been a couple of questions out there lately about his character because of what happened a couple of years ago. But I don't think that's going to be a factor, Moore said in an interview. I think this guy's proven himself to be beyond reproach. Regarding his playing future, Parsons remains confident about his ability, despite not being on the field last season. I just feel like I'm the most versatile player in this class, he said. So I can play middle linebacker, I can play outside, and I can play pass rush. I don't think there's any place I can't play. I'm going to utilize my skills, and I'm going to just make plays happen as I did at Penn State. And I will not dispute any of those facts in terms of him being versatile. I remember when I did a film breakdown with Fireside Giants, I was very, very excited to do a film breakdown of Parsons. The guy's a great linebacker prospect. The other thing you got to factor in, if I'm not mistaken, New York Giants have not drafted a first-round linebacker since Lawrence Taylor. So you're going back a long ways. So the Giants do not have a history again. It's a new regime. We all know that Joe Judge is involved in some of the selections. If they were to draft Parsons, if the character concerns checked out, I'd be pretty stoked. I mean, I definitely think he's a guy that could make this defense go from a top 6 or 7 defense to possibly an elite defense. That's how much potential this guy has, and his versatility certainly fits what the New York Giants are looking to do. Now, if you were to draft Parsons, I think you have to go offensive guard in the second round. That's my opinion on it. They could elect to go wide receiver if there was a really good one to draft there, but me personally, I'm going with the guard in 2, maybe a guy like Wyatt Davis. But yes, if Parsons is there at 11 and the New York Giants are not concerned with past allegations and they think he's cleaned up his act, he could be a New York Giant on draft day. Again, he could very well go before we pick, but a really good pro day today by Micah Parsons with a 4.39 pro time, 40 time. Doesn't mean that that's official, but still, the guy's a freak athlete. As always, guys, if you liked what you watched, please subscribe, drop a comment, maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.